Number one, Mr. Robert McLennan.
Number one, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall be having further meetings later today.
Mr. McLennan.
Does the Prime Minister consider that the government's dogged inflexibility is a fair response to the exceptional sense of duty shown by our ambulancemen to the injured and dying victims of the gales and tempests this week? What greater catastrophe is required to bring home to her the justiceman of our ambulancemen's case?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Gentleman is not correct. The government and management have moved on the ambulance's case, the case of the ambulancemen for more pay. It is the ambulancemen who have not moved at all, since their unions actually recommended a long time ago that they accept a 6.5%. The government moved to an 18-month settlement, which would offer the ambulancemen increases of between 9 and 16.3%, which was a very considerable increases, which would cost £6 million more to implement in this financial year. That is far from being inflexible, it's actual movement.
Mr. Cyril Townsend. Number two.
I refer my honourable friend to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Cyril Townsend.
Would my right honourable friend agree that faced with the historic uncertainty in Eastern Europe and the collapse of law and order in East Germany, idle talk of a peace dividend is premature? Would it not be prudent for the United Kingdom to look to Vienna for serious and constructive negotiations rather than slashing our defence forces unilaterally?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I agree wholly with my honourable friend. Piecemeal reductions would be fateful, absolutely fatal at the present moment when it's a time of great uncertainty. The right way is to negotiate through the conventional force reductions in Vienna. That way we managed to get also effective reductions in the Warsaw Pact, indeed larger reductions there than on our side, and also some verification. And NATO is already considering precisely how those reductions should be shared out equitably between members of NATO.
Kinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister tell us what is her response to the statement made by church leaders yesterday appealing for the government to set up an independent inquiry with the purpose of resolving the ambulance dispute?
Mr. Speaker, I think if the right honourable gentleman listened to my previous answer, he would already know. The government has moved on the ambulance dispute. There is already a negotiating body, which is the right body to do the negotiations, and that the increases which the management have offered would cost the taxpayer some £6 million more this financial year.
Mr. Kinnock.
On the subject of the cost to the taxpayer, can the Prime Minister confirm that she's already spent £10 million of the public's money on keeping the dispute going, which is more than it would cost to settle the dispute? Where's the sense in that, either for the public or for the ambulance personnel, or indeed even for the government? And when the public so clearly supports the ambulance workers' case, why is the Prime Minister so completely out of touch with the feelings of the British people?
Mr. Speaker, the sense is to stick to established methods of negotiation, whether it be a pay review body or whether it be a Whitley Council. Once one goes away from that, it is very difficult for those who've honoured their own method of negotiation and who indeed settled, as 85% of them did in last early summer, at the amounts they were offered. It's a great pity then that the ambulance men, I think, did not accept the advice of their unions and settle at that time.
Mr. Matthew Carrington.
Number three, sir.
I refer my honourable friend to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Mr. Matthew Carrington.
My right honourable friend will know that my constituents who live round Stamford Bridge greatly welcome her and the Home Secretary's determination to bring to an end football hooliganism. Is this not in marked contrast to those who reject the all-seater stadiums and even seek incredibly to deny that football hooliganism exists? will my right honourable friend undertake to use the licensing powers in the Football Spectators Act to close any ground where football hooliganism persists in the streets outside the stadium?
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend knows, it was my right honourable friend and right honourable learned friend, the Home Secretary, made clear yesterday in his very robust way the government accepts the Taylor alternative strategy for dealing with these matters in football stadia, and we accept his recommendations. We did make it clear during the passage of the Football Spectators Bill that, in fact, having all-seat stadia could be made a condition of a licence being given by the Football Licensing Authority, so it will be open to do that. I think those conditions for licence do not, in fact, apply to hooliganism outside the grounds, which are already dealt with by other matters such as the Public Order Act, and also some of the changes we made in prohibiting alcohol to be available on buses and trains travelling to designated football matches.
Mr. Tony Lloyd.
Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister tell the House on this day when there's been support for ambulance workers in Britain, why is it that she's so quick to praise them and so slow to pay them?
Mr. Speaker, of course I am always quick to praise the ambulancemen, as I am other people who work in the health service, 84% of whom had already accepted last summer pay increases between 6.5 and 6.8%. We have in fact offered the ambulancemen, according to where they work or their qualifications, increases of between 9% and 16.3% over a period of 18 months. And that was an increased offer over the first one, which they rejected.
Mrs. Theresa Gorman.
Number 4, sir.
I defer my honourable friend's reply, which I gave some moments ago.
Mrs. Gorman.
In view of the Hansard Society's report on women at the top, would my right honourable friend not agree with me that it really does make sense that a job created in the home or elsewhere which helps a woman to go out to work is just as valid as any other job and should be treated the same for tax purposes? Oh, and while we're on the subject, what about a few jobs for top women in our own wit's office and even in the cabinet?
I think order. Order. How many other order? Only one question.
Mr. Speaker.
No, it's unfair to our honourable lady's colleagues, I think, to ask more than 2 questions. The Prime Minister.
I'm sure it was all very interesting, but I only heard about the first half. May I reply to the half which I heard? First with regard to tax allowances, which my honourable friend is asking for people who look after children, they are not, as she knows, allowed for tax any more than expenses of travelling to work or having someone to look at home to look after an elderly relative would be. That is the present law, and it would need a change in the finance bill to change it. So I hope she will make her representations to different quarters. I can say nothing about it. And with regard to her other request, I'm sure that my right honourable friend, the Patronage Secretary, will have heard it and consider what further action to take about it.
Dr. David Owen.
Will the Prime Minister tell us what is going wrong with Anglo-American relations at the moment? We have the United States President cutting defence by 2%. We have emerging further reductions, faster and deeper, in the CFE negotiations. And we also have him openly advocating a NATO defence review. The Prime Minister refuses to do any of those things. And the two governments can't even split their differences between 6 months and a year for the compulsory repatriation of Vietnamese boat people.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that is 2 questions in one. May I take the one on defence? As the right honourable gentleman will be aware, the United States expenditure on defence is a much bigger proportion of her national income than any other major NATO country. She spends 6% of her national income on defence. On a similar calculated basis, we spend 4% of our national income on defence. So I don't think the right honourable gentleman can criticise the United States if it makes some changes. With regard to CFE, any changes which affect the mainland of Europe from the Atlantic to the Urals are of course made through the CFE, and any proposals go through the NATO machinery first, so that we are all consulted and agree what should go forward to the CFE. I'm sure he would realise that that is perfectly right. With regard to the Vietnamese boat people, yes, there is a difference of opinion, possibly because of America's history in Vietnam, and possibly because she lost 55,000 people in her fight there, which I believe kept communism back for long enough for it not to extend throughout the area. We shall go forward, of course, with compulsory repatriation.
Sir Hal Miller.
Number 5, sir.
5.
I refer my honourable friend to reply which I gave some moments ago.
Hal Miller.
Mr. Speaker, would my right honourable friend agree that whatever other governments may feel able to do, the main responsibility for maintaining the confidence of the people of Hong Kong, on which their prosperity and stability must depend, inevitably lies with the People's Republic of China, and that the conclusions of the Draft Basic Law Committee in respect of elections in Hong Kong are hardly likely to add to their confidence? Will my right honourable friend say if we are yet ready to say what we will do in that respect?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is, of course, absolutely right in saying that China has a very important part, not the only part, but a very important part in maintaining confidence in Hong Kong. So also have the Hong Kong people, so have we, during our conduct of the administration, right up until the lease is terminated in 1997. Ideally, we obviously wish to agree with China improvements in democracy and increases in the democratic process in Hong Kong, which could be continued through 1997. We shall continue to do our best by the people of Hong Kong, and also to observe the Anglo-Chinese agreement on the future of Hong Kong, believing that that's in the best interest for the future beyond 1977.
Claire Short.
Number 6, sir.
I refer the honourable lady to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Claire Short.
Doesn't the Prime Minister agree that the ambulance workers have overwhelming public support? Does she consider herself to be a Democrat? And if so, why doesn't she listen to the view of the people and agree to binding arbitration so that this dispute can be brought to an end?
No, Mr. Speaker, the ambulance people have their own negotiating body through which the negotiations should in fact take place. As the honourable lady is aware, this is a claim that really comes from last year, when 84% of the people with whom the ambulance men's work in the National Health Service settled at between 6.5 and 6.8%. Since then, the ambulance men have had an increased offer, so it is not the management which hasn't moved, but the ambulance men themselves.
Dame Jill Knight.
Would my right honourable friend confirm, bearing in mind that the union leaders of the ambulance men have not always been straightforward in this matter, that it is not only a question of a 9% increase on offer now, but that offer goes back to April 1989, and that should be taken into consideration also.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is quite right. The offer is backdated to April 1989, and for those who have still been at their posts and working, there are also considerable backdated sums, lump sums, to be picked up now, varying from something like £650 to about £1,400 there and available when the ambulancemen settle in respect of their back pay.
Mr. Paul Boateng.
Number 7, sir.
The honourable gentleman to reply which I gave some moments ago.
Boateng.
Why does the Prime Minister continue to set her face like stone against the ambulance workers, whilst giving a £40 million tax handout to the private medical insurance industry? If she were to fall under a bus tomorrow, who would she... And it would have to be a brave one. Who would she call for? Booper or an ambulanceman?
Mr. Speaker, as I've already indicated, the ambulancemen have had an offer, according to where they work and their qualifications, of an increase in pay varying from 9% to 16.3%. Many of them are still maintaining their accident and emergency service, and we honour them for it. Others are not. I would have thought that 9 to 16.3% was a very fair and reasonable offer.